What's up, heathens? How ya doing? Tonight we have proof that the Exodus happened, all generated by eyewitness accounts. I promise you that by the end of tonight you will be a Christian because we have solid proof that a Jew parted the seas and stole a bunch of Jewish people out of the kingdom of Egypt, and then they talked to a giant pillar of fire, and then they wandered in the desert for 40 years. So, if you're interested in the evidence for this, or the supposed evidence for this, then I hope that you guys will stay tuned. Tonight we are watching the proof for Exodus. And boy, I worked on, like, all day, randomly throughout the day. I worked on notes that I can have right over here just so that you guys will have the best information. And I have to get shit situated. So, to start off, a lot of apologists out there like to make several excuses for how Exodus is literal history and how we know it actually happened. Some people go after the chariots in the Red Sea and all these other things, and maybe some kind of weird, like, faked shit that points to the Jews being enslaved in Egypt at this time or something like that. But all of these apologetic reasons for thinking this are just completely bass-ackwards, okay? This guy uses seriously bad historical reasoning to make his point. And it's even worse than, like, chariot wheels in the Red Sea. Just putting that out there. I'll let you guys determine for yourself if these particular bits of evidence is worse than the chariot wheels in the Red Sea.
Welcome to the 1 Minute Apologist. We interview the world's leading apologists to provide credible answers to curious questions.
Ted, do we have any extra biblical evidence for the Exodus?
Yes, Bobby, we do, and it's actually found in the text itself. Just like the New Testament, obviously, if the New Testament writers are eyewitnesses of the resurrection, we look for the same type of evidence in the Old Testament.
Okay, so before you keep going on, I would like to say this is not extra biblical evidence. He literally asked you, is there extra biblical evidence for this? And you said, yes, within the text itself. That's not extra biblical evidence there, bud. What, Ted Wright, I believe is his name? Yeah, Ted Wright, Executive Director of Cross-Examined. You're trying to tell me Cross-Examined, the Executive Director has said that extra biblical evidence is contained within the Bible? Anyways, so first of all, we don't have any kind of eyewitness testimony for Exodus. In fact, it was written in a documentary style with at least 3 authors, if not more. Well, not authors, editors. They edited them. And I do want to say thank you, real quick, to Luna Greenwich for the super chat, as well as Uhan Roderick, who says, Chrismer said 3rd vote. We got 3 votes now, honey. Oh, sorry, Greenwich. My bad. 2 E's. I can't read right now. So the Exodus account, it is made for, like, theological purposes. There's an entire, like, theme to the Exodus account and everything like that. Mainly in Exodus, the main message is that God is in control of everything. You just got to trust God, and he will deliver you from bad shit that's happening. Also, it kind of sets up a sort of, like, guilt sort of thing, because later on, there's this whole idea, like in the New Testament, about, guilting people into believing in Christ. And in this is the guilting people into believing in this God, because this God got you out of slavery in Egypt. And so, like, that's one of the main themes of it. You see, Yahweh never lets them forget this point either. Throughout the entire Old Testament, Yahweh repeatedly tells them that he is the one that brought them up out of Egypt. He's the one that saved them. He's also the one that let them get enslaved. But we'll pass on that for right now. We got another one. Mrs. Uhan says fourth vote. Make that a fifth vote. John got fourth. So generally, when we're looking for extra biblical evidence, what we're actually looking for is, other accounts that independently corroborate, what your account is saying. He's not going to do this here because obviously he's pulling the information from within the text itself and corroborating it with itself. Ardoin says, damn you, GE, you made me want to try that Egyptian beer. Googled it, and it actually doesn't sound bad at all. Fuck! Now I'm going to have to try it too. I doubt that I can get it because it's Egyptian, and maybe I'd have to import it, and that is complicated. All right. Let's see what his evidence exactly is.
I want to know, is there any type of clues that the writers in the Old Testament, specifically in the book of Exodus, that they knew about Egyptian culture? And when you begin to dig down into the text and look at some of the things that are written about, it really shows an indication that these are people who eyewitnessed these things that happened in the Exodus.
Okay, so the trouble here, though, when dealing with historiography, is that you have to separate out what was common knowledge at the time versus what is an eyewitness account. You can't claim that it's an eyewitness account if you're just regurgitating what the Egyptians already believed or anything like that. That's not eyewitness testimony, and that can't be considered eyewitness testimony. But it's also been it's been sufficiently substantiated that Exodus was crafted for theological purposes rather than like history purposes. Like, they weren't recording history; they were crafting a theology in order to, chronicle their group, and their society. Just because you add some basic information from surrounding like religions or myths doesn't mean that that's an eyewitness account. If you think about it, what would we expect out of some kind of extra biblical account? We would expect to see like Jews revolting, Jews escaping into the desert. We would expect accounts like that. And we don't find that in the Egyptian records. But you see, they kept meticulous records about their slaves. If a slave escapes, they recorded it. They wanted to know where he went, which way he went, how did you find him, and everything like that. So they were very meticulous in keeping these kind of records. And we never actually have like a mass exodus of Jews leaving Egypt. There's some evidence to suggest that Jews were in Egypt in the 100 or 200 year time span in which Exodus could have happened. But there was never any kind of giant exodus or giant slave workforce in Egypt. And the fact that we don't have these particular records is very problematic for the Christians' argument or the apologists' argument. We got Luna Greenwich that says, GE, I screwed up the first super chat. Big thank you for both informative and hilarious. Oh, for being informative and hilarious. Oh, thank you, Luna, for being here and watching all of my stuff. I really appreciate it. Okay, yeah, that was the only super chat. Thank you so much, Luna. All right, let's continue with this.
A couple of examples. One example is found in the Egyptian evidence. It's called the Egyptian Book of the Dead, and it is a book of spells that talks about what happens in the afterlife. And one of the things that happen in the afterlife, of course, you know that when pharaohs when they die and they are embalmed, they are actually mummified. And one of the things that happens in the mummy is the mummies are buried with a scarab. A scarab is a beetle, and the beetle actually has a spell from the Egyptian Book of the Dead. When we read in the Exodus account that when the Pharaoh was confronted by Moses and God through the plagues, it says he hardened his heart. We know from the Egyptian evidence that the hardening of the heart is not a good thing, because in the afterlife, the Pharaoh's heart would be weighed in the balance would we be weighed in a scale balance, and if the heart was heavy and if it was hard, it would overweigh the feather of truth, and the Pharaoh would be condemned to wander in the afterlife.
Okay, so on this particular point, he's correct about the Egyptian faith. He's correct about, them putting a scarab over their heart, because Egyptians didn't consider like the brain to contain like all of the person's memories, personality, and everything like that. They actually thought that it was contained in the heart. If you didn't know that, today I learned. But where he's wrong is that the hardening of Pharaoh's heart made it heavier, as if God were damning him to roam the afterlife. Okay, there's a lot of different problems with this. First of all, if you'll listen to what he actually said was that, oh, God hardened Pharaoh's heart. He made it heavier. He's conflating the terms there, because hardening the heart doesn't necessarily mean that it gets heavier or that God was making it heavier. He does this twice in this particular section. So what he's trying to do is he's deceptively telling you that the hardening of the heart makes the heart heavier, and therefore there's some kind of connection with the Egyptian faith. Even if that were the case, that doesn't mean that it's an eyewitness account or that it's more reliable because they know about the Egyptian faith. This was common knowledge in the Egyptian culture and everything. Everybody would know this. So them just regurgitating what Egyptians already believe wouldn't be some kind of eyewitness account. But also, it's not the theological purpose behind hardening the heart isn't actually to damn the Pharaoh to hell or anything like that. It was actually to provide justification for the fuckery that God was going to put him through. That's the reason why. And we can get into the whole idea of God hardening the heart and then blaming Pharaoh for God hardening his heart to the point where he's not going to let the Jews go. We could talk about that a different time. That's a fuckery in and of itself. But what we're talking about here is a connection to Egyptian faith. The theology behind the hardening of the heart has no connection to that. And I don't even know why God, the one that's wanting to trump the other faiths and prove how the other faiths are false, would be wanting to do something to Pharaoh that would damn him in his own faith. He would already be damned because he's not sucking that God dick. Why does he need to harden his heart then? So this essentially proves nothing at all.
And so the scarab was meant, when it was buried in the Pharaoh, it was meant to keep his heart soft, and so that heart would not be condemned. So this is an interesting eyewitness detail that only someone who understood Egyptian culture would have understood. And another indication that the Exodus account is genuine internally in the text is the motif or the concept of the snake.
All right, hold on. Sorry, I let my notes go on just a little bit too far for that. So this is just simply wrong. The whole scarab keeping the heart soft and everything like that so that he would be protected. The actual reason why the scarab was placed on the heart is to protect the heart, to protect the memories and everything like that of the individual that was passing into the afterlife. That was the purpose of the scarab. But just like before, he's deceptively trying to make you think of softening the heart as making it lighter. But I really don't think that is what the Jews or the Israelites were doing with this particular theology. I think that this particular theology was more about justifying God fucking up the Pharaoh and all of the Egyptian people later on because God hardened his heart. That's the entire theological purpose of hardening Pharaoh's heart. And super chats. Yes, sorry. Wuhan. Attention. Hard. That is all. Back to the stream. So in any context that you try to push this in, it just simply doesn't make sense.
You see the snake all throughout in Genesis, and you see it all through the Exodus. And we know from Egyptian culture that the snake was a very, very important symbol. In fact, the snake was a god.
So yes, the Egyptian faith had a lot of gods. It's like over 2,000 gods that they had. The snake was a very prominent figure in Egyptian mythology. And the problem here, though, is that everybody would know this. This is general fucking knowledge. So you can't tie this, the whole staff turning into a snake thing, to being an eyewitness account, because everybody knew this. Everybody knew the importance of the snake to Egyptian mythology at that time. But also, you're completely wrong about the symbolism of the rod turning into a snake. Again, the major theme of Exodus is that God is the most powerful thing in the land, and God controls everything, and God will stomp your faith out. He will curb stomp that shit, okay? That is the entire purpose of the staff turning into a snake. The snake is representative of Egypt, or more specifically Pharaoh. And what Moses does is he bends down and God tells him to pick up the snake by the tail. And this is the worst way to handle a snake. Don't you ever fucking do it, okay? Because it will fucking bite you, all right? And the snake was a viper, so it was incredibly poisonous. But the entire point is that Moses obeyed God without hesitation. He bent down, picked up the snake, and the snake turned back into the rod. God essentially defeating Pharaoh. It's a lot like they're using symbolism to do some foreshadowing on this entire story. This is crafted theology. This is a crafted fiction, crafted mythology. This is not an eyewitness account. This stuff does not happen in history. It's not recorded as if it were history. It's recorded as if it were theology, because it is.
And then all the plagues of the Exodus, all the 10 plagues, each plague corresponded to an Egyptian god. And the final plague, the plague of the death of the firstborn, corresponded to the divinity of Pharaoh himself.
So this is all bullshit right here. I even checked with Megan from Digital Hammurabi, and they actually asked an Egyptologist friend of theirs about this particular subject. And no, the plagues do not match to the gods of Egypt. For one thing, the 10 most worshipped gods in Egypt don't even match the list of like gods that I found that match to the plagues. But also, since there were over 2,000 gods in the Egyptian faith, it just seems like you cherry pick what gods you want to assign to the 10 plagues, and then those are the 10 gods that they represent. Now, they mask this with this idea that, it conforms to the whole motif, or the theme rather, of God being in control and totally dominating the Egyptian faith. And that looks appealing on the surface, but with the fact that there are over 2,000 gods and they pretty much just cherry pick which gods represent which plagues, it seems like that is not the case, and it's just pure bullshit. Also, he talks about the killing of the firstborn. The killing of the firstborn is most likely a mirror of the very beginning of Exodus. Because if you remember, in the beginning of Exodus, Pharaoh orders for all the Jewish kids to be killed, and at the very end, God has the Holy Spirit descend upon the Egyptians and kill all the firstborn. It's a mirror. It's basically God getting his vengeance on Pharaoh for doing what he did to the Jews. And this is crafting not fairy tales. This is crafting mythology. This is crafting a theology. So there's no way that this can be like eyewitness testimony or anything like that. I don't care how many points you can tie to Egyptian theology. It doesn't make it a representative of Egyptian theology. And just because somebody mentions some shit that the Egyptians believed doesn't mean that it's an eyewitness account to it. If it's general knowledge, then it's not specific enough to tie to an eyewitness account.
So when you begin to add in this Egyptian understanding of the Exodus, it's a very strongly Egyptian flavoring. Even the name Moses is an Egyptian name. So a lot of internal evidence that the Exodus is definitely a genuine account.
No, there's no, like, for one thing, this entire video here is titled, "What is the extra biblical evidence for Exodus?" Not, "What is the internal biblical evidence for Exodus?" It's, "What's the external evidence?" And simply put, there is no external evidence that corroborates what Exodus says. This, archaeology has proven this, and even just a textual examination of the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible, indicate that it was an edited work, like edited and redacted by several different authors that stitched it together in order to produce this shitty fucking narrative. I mean, I guess it's not so shitty now because you see a lot of different storytelling elements in it. You've got parallels, you've got symbolism, you've got mirrors, you've got all of these different things contained within it, and it does its job. It teaches a theology. The theology being that you got to worship Yahweh. Yahweh will protect you if you believe in God and do exactly what God wants. He will protect you, keep you safe, and defeat your enemies. That is what Exodus is about. That's what pretty much the Old Testament is about. The Old Testament is filled with those types of stories. And it goes all the way throughout it, too. Like with Judges. Judges is all about how if you give everything up to God, He will protect you no matter what. I mean, if you think about that guy, who's the guy, Samson. You think about Samson, he was fucking whores. God didn't give a shit about that. He still protected him. It wasn't until Samson cut his hair when God was like, "You shouldn't have got that haircut, bro. Told you not to get a fucking haircut. Now you're gonna die." But at the very end, of course, he gets some strength back. God's like, "I'll let you go out with a bang." Zip. And then allowed him. Anyways, but it's all throughout the Bible. So the fact that Exodus and the Pentateuch was crafted documentary style by several different redactors and editors, it was never a historical account. It's a fictional account crafted to teach the theology of the Israelites. That's all that it was. And you don't have any archaeological evidence for it. You don't have any textual evidence for it. You don't have any extra biblical evidence for it. There's no reason to suggest that the Old Testament, the Pentateuch, relays any kind of actual history. And that includes Abraham, Moses, Noah, all of them most likely didn't exist. So thank you, 1 Minute Apologist, for stopping by today and laying this on us. I'm not convinced that Exodus is a true account or an eyewitness account or anything like that. I'm not convinced of Christianity or even of Judaism. So I guess you failed today, 1 Minute Apologist. But anyways, I hope that you heathens enjoyed this. I hope that you guys... hold on, let me switch back to my main cam. I hope you guys enjoyed this really short response video. They put out really... It's called a 1 Minute Apologist, but they always go for like 3 minutes. It should really be called 3 Minute Apologist. But anyways, we're going to be going to the Skeptic Mafia comments now. If you want to join the Skeptic Mafia, you can smash that join button right down below this video, or you can go to joinskepticmafia.com. For as little as $1.99, you can become a Skeptic Mafia member and get all the cool emojis. If you become a full mafioso, you can leave comments about the video that we're going to be going over right now. So we're going to be going and doing that. If you're leaving out of here, you're watching on the replay, I really appreciate you stopping by, giving this video a watch, giving me a view. And don't forget, before you leave, go down there, smash that like button, and subscribe if you're already not. And make sure you stand up and use your voice. It's very important. Bye, heathens. But don't go. We got Skeptic Mafia comments that I got to get pulled up right now. So y'all come back now, you hear? Like, don't go anywhere is what I mean.